everyone, and welcome to the show. My name is Julisa,
And I'm Michael.
and we're so excited to have you with us today as we talk about going from La Verne to the corner office.
That's right, Julisa. And to help us learn what that's like, we have one of our esteemed alumni joining us today. He's an executive director with Wells Fargo and a commercial banking leader covering Northern California and the Pacific Northwest. He's a proud alumnus of the College of Business and currently serves on the university's President's Advisory Council. So without further ado, please help me welcome Mr. Ron Johnson.
It's good to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
We're thrilled that you can join us to share your story about going from La Verne to the corner office. So we have some questions that we would like to ask you to learn a little bit more about what that was like. So let's start with your La Verne roots. Michael, would you like to kick us off?
Yeah, of course. So can you take us back to a time when you were at La Verne? What inspired you to come to La Verne, and how did you choose to pursue a business degree?
Yeah, excellent questions, and you're causing me to have to remember back 25 years, so to share my age here. When La Verne expressed some interest in me as a basketball player, went to Covina High School, and when they engaged me to come to a campus tour and to potentially be a part of the team, I fell in love with La Verne immediately. I mean, the things that really stood out: it's a beautiful campus, got to stay close to home. The small class sizes were also super attractive to me. I thrive on being able to engage with professors, with the other students. And to me, it was a no-brainer. So I was very excited to start my educational journey here at La Verne. As far as a business major, my father worked in banking his whole life, and we spent a lot of time growing up talking about business. And so I knew from a very early age that's something that I wanted to do. And La Verne was also an outstanding choice for me in that regard, not just because of how intimate and engaging the education was, but other schools I was considering, particularly the UC system, they didn't have business administration degrees. It was all economics, and it was important to me to major in business administration so that I could apply that directly when I got into the work world.
Well, very nice. And like you said, going into the work world, how did La Verne help you get your foot in the door? Would you say that you did any internal networking before you graduated?
So I didn't do as much as I wish I would have. That's one of the regrets. However, it worked out really well. I've got a fun little anecdotal story to tell you about how that happened. Again, coming back to the fact that you get to know your classmates at La Verne, as both of you can attest. What was really important to me going in my senior year was having an internship. So I was deathly afraid of graduating from La Verne and not having a job. I don't know if either of you can relate to that anxiety. And so I bumped into right across the crosswalk here. I recall it as vividly as it was yesterday. I bumped into one of my classmates, and to set the context, she and I didn't always see eye to eye. Right? We would have opposite perspectives on issues and some healthy debate in class, but she was very well connected with the business fraternity in the School of Business. So I walked up to her and said, hey, I'm not going to play basketball my senior year. I'd love to know who's coming to campus for the career fair and if there are any internships available. And she says to me, looks me dead in the eye and says, I'm leaving one right now. I don't necessarily care for the company. The work is not something I see myself doing. I just question the model. I don't like it at all. I think you would be perfect. And so she made the introductions when they came to campus, and that internship turned into a 25-year career with Wells Fargo.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So as a business major, what did you learn from your business courses? And was there anything that you learned in your non-business courses that applies to business?
A lot from both, actually, and that's just the other thing that I think is truly special about La Verne. So as you might expect from the business courses, business law, accounting, the different principles of management, those foundational courses from business were important, and you apply them every day in the work world, particularly in financial services. So it was a well-balanced education in business that was super rewarding. But I learned as much and took as much away from the experience at La Verne from non-business courses. So as a student athlete, it was important to have classes in the morning because you'd have games at night and practice in the afternoon. And I was fortunate enough to come into La Verne with enough credits that I could take elective type courses. And I gravitated toward, the philosophy courses, psychology courses, and had such an amazing experience in a survey. It was a survey of the New Testament course that I took with Dr. Jonathan Reed. that I ended up taking, I think, 3 or 4 more courses with him, so much so that I almost ended up graduating with a few units short, I think 8 at this point, from a religious studies minor, because I just fell in love with the way that he engaged with the students. And how that applied to my work world is when you understand how people think, when you understand kind of what their motivators are, what their stressors are, when you've got a broader perspective on organizations and on the world, that extends far beyond, the X and O's of business that you learn through your traditional business education. So that's part of the balance and the well-rounded nature of being a student at La Verne that I think is something that's just truly unique.
That's awesome.
Well, thank you. That's super interesting. You mentioned that you were in basketball. How did your experience as a student athlete complement also your academics?
Yeah. Well, time management is one thing you learn very quickly, which I'm sure you can relate to as a soccer player.
Right.
The ability to work on a team with people from different backgrounds and experiences is something that absolutely translates into the work world. The fact that you have to push yourself to compete. You're not guaranteed a spot the next year, you're not guaranteed playing time. So it challenges that part of who you are as a person. And I think that, coupled with the education that you get here at La Verne, you bring something unique as a student athlete into the world. A prospective employer is going to know this is somebody that can balance multiple elements of their life simultaneously and perform at a high level. When I was playing basketball, I was also working, minimum wage jobs to help pay for the bills. And so if you can do all of that in that 4-year period, when you're just focused on work, right, you find you have so much more time. So I think they complement each other really nicely.
Awesome. So I've heard a lot about servant leadership and you being a leader in the business world. How does servant leadership work, and what would you say is most important about it?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question, and it is something that's near and dear to my heart. If I had to give my own definition of what servant leadership is, it's really the leader going into work every day with their team, whether that's in person or a far-flung team that's in different parts of the country, with the orientation toward the team, right? My role as a leader is to help them be their best, help them perform at their best levels. It's demonstrating sincere and genuine interest in who they are as a person, not just what they bring to work, and have an orientation toward thinking about how do I help them be the best version of their self every day. It's not about you being the center of attention as the leader or people conforming to your approach to management. It's truly about being custom with each person. And that's not to say there aren't overarching principles of structure and routines and difficult conversations, but that connection with each member of the team, demonstrating that you care, goes a really, really long way. And I think it's the reason people should pursue leadership, is to serve their team, and ultimately the outcome of that tends to bode well for the leader, right? The business performs well, and and everybody wins. So it's really kind of a virtuous circle.
Awesome.
I completely agree. What would you say are some particular things in that realm that some leaders should be aware of when their team is being led through change, uncertainty, and some crisis? And could you provide an example from your career?
Oh boy, a lot. Several examples over the course of my career. The first thing that I believe is really important when we think about leading through change is that most people are change averse. Like the overwhelming majority just are resistant to change, which is something you have to know going in. There's a very few people that go in and say, I'm actually excited and energized by this change. And I like to think I'm one of those people. I've been through a lot of change in my career, and you can get really comfortable in the status quo, but anything that's going to truly help you grow and transform your life is going to be a product of change. And if you're not changing, the world around you is. Right? You may think you're staying still, but the landscape around you is evolving and changing. So knowing that going in is important, so you can have some sympathy and some empathy for people that are terrified by change. And then it's how you adapt to the specific situation. So COVID-19 is a perfect example, and I'm sure a lot of business leaders share examples related to COVID. But in my specific case, I had just moved to Phoenix to take the job to stand up the vertical coverage model within the bank in January. And by March, we were working from home. So I had just hired the team. We had to build this thing from scratch. And immediately they were moved out into work from home environments. You think about all the fear associated with COVID at the time. Believe it or not, Zoom was a new technology. We weren't meeting through video conference back then. And so having to adjust the routines, the communication cadence, the focus of the team was less about driving revenue as it was about things like executing against the PPP program that the banks were on the front lines for, and taking care of customer needs in a new model where they've got their own concerns with their business. So I think a couple of things to take away from that are you've got to be adaptable and nimble to adjusting your routines when you're dealing with change. The value of meeting with people one-on-one to check in with them, see how they're doing, see what issues are happening. I had team members that were really impacted by the civil unrest, and that was something where they wanted to invest their time. You don't know as a leader if you aren't asking. And you have to then be really intentional about how you structure the team insofar as how they engage with one another. Because you're not physically together in an office to be able to ask a question. And so communication is super important. Clarity of objectives and vision is also extremely important. And then flexibility and adaptability during times of change. As much as you think as a leader, you've got your mind around what's happening, life throws you curveballs. And if you can take the available information, synthesize that in a way that the team can understand in simple terms like what we're doing, what the priorities are, it helps people get through periods of change. And that was my experience through the pandemic in 2020.
Well, thank you for sharing.
That's awesome. That's really awesome.
Absolutely.
So what's something you know now that you wish you had known as a
Ooh,
student?
okay. Something I know now that I wish I had known as a student. Boy, that is a really good question. I think as a student, I was so focused on the future, right, and moving forward. There's that anxiety. I don't know if either of you can relate to that feeling of, okay, what am I going to do with my life?
Yeah,
post-college?
definitely.
Yeah, I have had that conversation, and to be present, I think is something I wish I could have told myself then, because I felt as though if I wasn't the first to graduate, get a position, with a company, and all these other milestones that we set, I was really hard on myself and felt as though, okay, I wasn't succeeding. And I think there's value in understanding that you can only control the present. You make the best decisions you can with the available information, and provided you show up, you work hard, you're open-minded, you're authentic, things will tend to work out if you're doing all of that. So to stay present and enjoy that as opposed to having all that anxiety over the big picture and the future is something I wish I had known then. Absolutely.
Thank you. I'm sure Julisa can understand that answer, because I definitely agree with that it's hard to stay present and to stay grounded.
Sure.
Being students, we're really focused on the future, what we're going to do, what internships we might have, what career path we might take. And so it's really nice to hear you say that if you could give your old self advice, it would to be grounded.
Well, it's easy for me to say now, right? I can look back 25 years later and it worked out. At the time, there's no way to know that.
Right.
There's no way to know, like, hey, it's going to be okay. I'm doing the right things. I can't clearly see what the future holds for me.
Right.
But I'm doing all the right things in the present. And so, yeah, it's hard. I'd probably have a lot of the same angst if I was sitting in your chair today. But that's the advice I would give. It will be okay. And, there's no substitute for hard work and focus and determination. And, in any case, that's my advice.
Yeah. Well, that's great advice. Thank you. And I'm sure that you can still apply that advice to, your personal life or your academic, professional life even now. And so that's something that I'll be sure to remember as I go through this next period of my academic life.
Well, and one more thing, too, along those lines is you're not going to ever stop learning. Like, commencement's not the destination, and it's commencement for a reason. It's a beginning. And continuing education, I probably had a good 15 years between La Verne and continuing my education. But whether it's, a degree, a certificate, you're always going to be learning. The world around you is changing. And so that lifelong learning, that love of lifelong learning is super important. And that's something else that I probably didn't recognize as much when I was on campus here as I do today.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
That's probably my favorite value of the school is the lifelong learning
Yeah.
value.
Yeah.
I never knew that that was one of the
Yeah.
university's values until I was taking the La Verne experience
Mhm.
courses, and I learned about it, and it just made so much sense. As long as you remain a student at all times, you tend to receive the success that you want to receive by being that student and
Yeah.
living up to the standard of lifelong learning.
Totally. And it looks different for everyone,
Right.
right? Their path is different, but yeah, absolutely. And be curious.
Mhm.
Be curious as well. I mean, those are the best people. Those that perform best in the work world have a sincere and genuine curiosity, whether that's about their customer, whether it's about the company, it's about the world, economics, whatever the case may be. That curiosity that I think most of us have younger in life, don't let that don't let that light get burnt out in your work life. I mean, maintain that curiosity. It'll take you to interesting places.
Right.
Well, thank you. That's great advice for aspiring professionals like ourselves.
Definitely.
And I know as me and Michael start our careers, we're thinking a lot about how to advance ourselves. And I'm sure that all of the students on campus are thinking that as well. Can you speak a little bit about how giving back is important and what a business person can do to be able to give back to their community?
Yeah, there are so many ways to give back. I started giving to the university not long after I graduated, and it was a modest amount that I directed to La Verne men's basketball because I recall there wasn't a lot of the program isn't a revenue generator for the university, and so I knew if I could only give a small amount, that's where it would make the greatest impact, right? And then over time, you kind of as your career progresses, as hopefully your earnings go increase in lockstep, you're able to do more. But that financial piece, it doesn't take much early. You can, in my case, it was just every paycheck. Someone went out and went to La Verne, right? And then as you progress in life, it's things like coming back to campus and guest lecturing. I had the opportunity to do that a couple of years ago in Dr. Isfahani's class. It was 2022 in advance of the gala, which I also attended, which was terrific. And reconnecting with professors, offering whatever your expertise are in life is a terrific way to give back. So, you can give monetarily, you can give through your expertise, you can give through your time. As I think, about where I want to be more involved moving forward, I think it's more of the one-on-one. If there are students who I can positively impact or be a resource for or connect, to prospective employers or help them build their network, like that's another way you can do it. So, and that's just foundational to La Verne. I mean, I recall when I was on campus, one of the courses that I took, which the course name escapes me, that's probably not as important, I got to be a tutor in the AVID program over at a junior high school in Duarte. And, so La Verne does ingrain that in you at an early age. Like you can give time, you can give expertise, you can obviously give financially to the university, but super rewarding. And I think it's why I've had such a bias toward giving back. Or I actually hate to say giving back, toward paying it forward. Mm-hmm. All of us have had somebody in our lives somebody or many people who have been helpful to us along the journey, and what better way to say thank you than to be helpful to somebody else. So yeah, lots of ways to give back, but start now, start early, and do it for life. And I promise you will receive more than you give through that experience.
Well, thank you. And I think you are making a positive impact even right now with this conversation. So thank you.
That's nice of you to say. Yeah.
So I have a bit of a more industry-specific question. This question kind of excites me because I am concentrating in finance, and I would love to have a career in banking.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, what do you see as one of the biggest shifts that's happening in banking today?
Yeah. Well, I mean, banking in general is a study of risk, right? Everything you do in banking, whether you're making a loan or you're making a choice about a customer that you want to bank, there's risk involved, right? And so as we think about the landscape today, I mean, there's all these economic factors, right, that are all well known and change by the day that can affect the industry. What I'm seeing as far as trends, there's a lot more consolidation within the banking industry, right? And not talking about like necessarily bank consolidation, but within an organization, particularly if it's a large money center bank, right, where there's pressures on efficiency. There are moves toward, if you're non-customer facing, figuring out where those hubs will be nationally. That's important. Offshoring, right? If there's things that can be done overseas, at a lower cost base. Banks are doing that, and they're building out, more and more. That's been the last 10, 15 years advent, but that will continue. And then switching to things that I think are not just related to banking specifically, you think about artificial intelligence and the implications, right? What will the future look like as far as AI agents, and if we get to the scary potentially place of artificial general intelligence, how will that help banks be more efficient and companies in general to do some of the work, for a lower cost base than a human employee, right? The agents and whatnot. So many, issues that affect not only the banking industry, but many industries that, we really are in a brave new world here, as far as the future is concerned. And it's one reason, like, I would highly recommend, as you think about what you want to pursue in work, you think about how easy it is to replace by, artificial intelligence and by technology. If you have a job that involves driving, I don't know, there's a truck driver, a cab driver, we already see Waymos out and about, right? That likely won't be there. So what is customer facing, right? What involves either, negotiation skills, interpersonal skills, the ability to connect, that's going to be a lot harder to replace. So a little AI tangent there, but
Right.
I think it's somewhat related.
And even the university is starting to get ahead on that too. This previous semester, I took an introduction to AI in business, which was taught by Dr. Martinelli, and it was very eye-opening. Learning the ins and outs of AI, how to use AI to be able to advance yourself in the career that you're in, rather than relying on it, but as being a helpful tool. I can really appreciate how the university is kind of getting ahead on that and beginning to implement those courses, because like you said, it's taking over and you got to be able to adapt to change, like you also spoke of earlier. And so I definitely appreciate that answer.
And no one has a crystal ball. We don't know where all of this is headed. We can just, like I said earlier, make the best decisions we can with the information we have today and be adaptable where needed.
Right. Yeah. And with that, and being adaptable and also being a little bit cautious, would you be able to give us maybe one to do and then one don't for our careers?
Yeah, the do's and don'ts, those are always interesting questions, because I can probably turn any do into don't and vice versa, right? So as far as the do's, what I'll say there is, it may not be sexy or in vogue, but the traditional values of work ethic, right? Showing up early, being willing to stay late, learning what the person next to you is doing, learning more about other opportunities and what your manager does, and being intentional about sharing your goals and your aspirations. There's a ton of value in that, right? There's no substitute for hard work. And what I've learned is, talent, in the work world, there's tons of talented people, but like the old expression goes, hard work will beat talent, like when talent doesn't work hard. And so bringing kind of that old school ethos to the work world, I think it'll help you stand out more in today's day and age than, maybe 25 years ago, right? Because we live in a world where everything's instant. Right, you can curate your news, you can download music or listen to whatever you'd like. Their food delivery is instant, right? Amazon's at the door every day, and so we're used to right now. And so the other piece of that I'd say is, if you think about the long time horizon of a career, right, and you do maintain perspective and patience, and you understand that the trajectory is not like this. You may have a lot of promotions and then plateau, and then and it ends up looking like that. But that patience and that broad perspective, combined with that work ethic, integrity in all that you do, is a recipe for success that I think is somewhat timeless. So those are a few of the do's. The don'ts can sound like do's as well. I'd say don't be afraid of change. Don't be afraid of new experiences. Don't be too rigid. Right? Sometimes we have a strong sense of script in our lives, and we think, all right, this is what's going to happen. I never thought I'd leave Southern California. Right? Why would you? The weather's great. My favorite sports teams are here. My family's here. But being open to relocating, I've relocated three times in my career, to the Pacific Northwest and then to Arizona, twice within the Pacific Northwest. And each time has been a significant jump for me along my career trajectory. And had I not been open-minded to it, we may not be sitting here today because my career could have turned out differently. So I'd say don't be afraid to put yourself out there. Don't be afraid to relocate. Don't be afraid to cross lines of business. And that, is something that people often won't do. I'm good at this. I've got subject matter expertise. I know how to do this. And I'm comfortable here. It's like, yeah, but moving into a place where you're not comfortable, how's the expression go? It's like growth happens just beyond the boundary of your comfort zone. I'm paraphrasing, but close enough. By being willing to do that, the opportunities for learning and growth and advancement are huge. So that would be one don't. Last don't would be don't just chase the dollar. So I had the privilege of attending a lecture on campus here when I was an undergrad, and I rarely did that. For whatever reason, I attended this one, and it might have been my junior year. And the speakers, central premise of their talk was about, don't chase the money. Like the money will come, build something, right? And you see that people will go from one firm to another to do the same job, you get a few incremental more dollars. They don't tend to advance like those who are able to compete against themselves year over year and earn their promotion. And all these years later, that stuck with me. It may be the reason why I've been with the firm for 25 years, but I'm privileged to have had 4 or so careers within that time, right, in different places. And so don't just chase the next shiny thing. Don't chase the dollar. Having a bias toward building something sustainable is a good thing. And maybe it'll come back around. Maybe that'll be in vogue with your generation.
Right.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, Ron, we can't say thank you enough for taking your time to join us today and sharing your journey with us.
Great being here.
We want to thank everybody for watching as well. And if you want to learn more about the College of Business at the University of La Verne, we ask you to please visit us online at business.laverne.edu. But until then, thanks for watching.
Thank you.